Good morning. I'm Mujahid Ramadan, and welcome to another edition of Police Promoting Unity. It is Wednesday, over the hump day. It's the middle of the week, and it's a little bit humid with some clouds outside, but it's still going to be warm with our ever-present guest co-host from PIO, Officer Misael Potter. Officer Potter, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well, Mr. Ramadan. Thank you. Welcome to our listeners. Here we are on another Wednesday. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
And we have a great topic today with a great guest.
No, the subject matter is just so timely. Before we get there, just want to mention a few things. Just had the opportunity just yesterday, and really kind of segues into our discussion. Pastor Troy Martinez, who's working with dads in schools, and what they're doing is dealing with violence and how to curtail that by having to get more men onto the school campuses. Interesting enough, elementary schools are one of the places that we're getting the biggest amount of requests from. Mm-hmm. But he and other members of the Multicultural Advisory Council, hats off to them, Dean Ishman, Tiffany Tyler, Rokai Youssef Zia. A lot of those MAC members are engaging through MAC, through LVMPD, that role, into other aspects of community activity and involvement, and it's really bringing in enhancing that network, which you already have in terms of first responders. And one of their captains came up afterwards and said, we'd like to have an advisory council like that for the school district. And I think it's a good idea. LVMPD are doing so many things that other, not only police departments, which they are, but it's really seen the Clark County School District to have that type of advisory council. So actually it's very, very impactful. One of the things that was unfolded yesterday was that Congressman Stephen Horsford was there, and he shared with and unveiled this $250 million package that he had ushered through for safer communities and schools. And that's going to be a tremendous resource, and it's going to help, I think, Captain, address some of the issues that we're going to talk about, even at the school level, because obviously that's where a lot of times what we're going to talk about, it ends up segues into schools, but a lot of this goes into how to help make schools safer. But he's also saying a substantial amount of these funding is going to go to community organizations to help them work to reduce violence in not only in schools but in communities also. So it's going to be a real benefit for not only the community but public safety, who's already in full time doing this. So thank you, Senator Horsford, for that good effort and the work. I know the 18, almost 2 years he's been invested in talking about this and this legislation, and his is almost personal. His father was killed just straight down D Street here, at D Street in Lake Mead, right there near Engelstadt, shot to death in a violent homicide that was there. And he lost an uncle to violence also, so it's no foreigner to him nor the community that he comes from. Mm-hmm. But ironically, yesterday we had the conclusion of something that ended up being kind of on a personal side for myself. A couple of years ago, I had a nephew who was shot to death. He's out there in the gang violence, and the young man who killed him, who murdered him, was sentenced yesterday also. He got 4 concurrent sentences. It didn't feel good. There's no winner in this situation. A nephew is not going to come back. Kyler, that's not going to bring him back. This young guy now is lost to us for the rest of his life. If he gets 4 concurrents, I think it's like 10 to 15 years on each. They're probably going to be there for a while. So it was just a losing situation. It's not only how much it costs us when we have a homicide. It runs into millions of dollars. Our guest today deals with that, but deals with it from a different perspective. We had the opportunity of just last week at the Multicultural Advisory Council of having Captain Reggie Rader. He's the captain of Organizational Development Bureau. And Captain Rader and his team came in, and actually he took our breath from us because we stopped eating out lunch. Captain, welcome to Police Promoting Unity.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate being here.
And one of the things, the division that he's over, I'm going to say, if I correct me if I'm wrong, is MACTAC.
Yes, MACTAC's one of the sections. And you mentioned Organizational Development Bureau. That's just our fancy way of saying training. So
okay.
I'm the captain that oversees all of the training, and one of those sections is MACTAC.
MACTAC, right.
Yes,
and that's what he's here to talk to us about. So, but all of the training when it comes to this type of activity. I had been a part of a number of people and ministers from the church communities to go down and go through and watch some of it. But what you showed us the other day was an updated version, and it was so compelling. What MACTAC is about, think of Uvalde for our listening audience. This is the kind of team work that goes into resolving those problems. Captain, how important is leadership when it comes to something that goes on like that? I want to talk about training, but a statement was made to me during the meeting. Leadership counts when it comes to those type of situations where there's an active shooter.
Leadership is critical, and there's several different types of leadership. There's organizational leadership, there's leadership on the ground, there's leadership of the officers to be empowered and have the training to do what they need to do. But if I can just back up and give our listeners kind of a historical background for how MACTAC came about and how we got to where we are in the Las Vegas Valley. So MACTAC stands for Multi-Assault Counterterrorism Action Capabilities. And that's just a pretty fancy name for saying if there's an active assailant, and we no longer use the term active shooter because we've seen around the country and around the world, you can use a vehicle, right? You can use an edged weapon, you can use a blunt object to do mass harm. So it's an active assailant approach that we have for our police department. In 2008, Mumbai was taken siege for 96 hours by 10 terrorists. And these 10 terrorists broke up into two groups, and they held the city hostage and killed over 175 people. That was concerning for us as a valley because everybody refers to Mumbai as the Las Vegas of India.
Oh, okay.
So when we talk about leadership, the leadership we had at the time over Metro sent our folks out there to get lessons learned from what happened out there and how we can have a response to go ahead and deal with that. And the traditional police response of overconvergence and going to the initial incident caused more casualties. So we had to have a tiered response. We had to have patrol officers being able to handle these threats and not wait for SWAT teams. Sadly, we mentioned Uvalde, and we'll let the jury play out on how all that's going to come about. But if you see any of the video and the things that we've learned so far, at least through the media, it's very alarming that the approach was not quicker. We talk about our leadership. Sheriff Joe Lombardo has prepared this agency, not only Las Vegas Metro, but all Southern Nevada first responders, including the fire department, on how to respond. MACTAC is a section that it's a regional concept. We are a Metro team, but we teach all first responders, including the fire departments and the police departments here. So no matter who shows up first, if it's a school police officer, North Las Vegas, Henderson, a city police officer, a Metro police officer, the tactics are going to be the same. And I want to assure the public that we do not wait here. We will not stand by and wait as innocent people are getting their lives taken away from them. So the very first officer that shows up, whether it be a school police officer on scene or a passing by patrol unit, will quickly enter that school or business or wherever that venue may be and engage that individual. Because historically it shows that an active assailant will continue their violent acts until they are confronted by law enforcement or by security. And then at that time they will either turn that attention on the first responders or self-terminate and end their own life. So either one of those results is more desirable than innocent people being affected and having their lives put at risk.
I was heard over the years in my relationship with LVMPD and its evolution, I would hear, training works, training pays off. And I'm a naysayer because I don't know anything about training enough to that type of detail. I didn't know about you got to go to the range that we qualify because you want to make sure that you're up to speed on this. And I think probably when we lost Saldo and Beck, it was a time that light finally clicked on. I could see where the training had actually kicked in. When the officer talked about his approach and going into the store and what he was looking for, I'm thinking, and then something in the training clicked in that said, okay, wait a minute, she shouldn't be here, and she was one of the shooters, which made him turn back and lay fire on her. Training pays off. Talk to us, because that's extensive training, what you showed us they went through the other day. You say you do it for everyone, but under this active assailant, talk to us about the value of the training and what do you actually put the officers through. And the key point at the front of it is, how much does it take to train a person to go towards gunfire? Put aside their own personal risk, their own personal safety, their own personal life, their family in the background, and move towards gunfire. How much does that take to get that individual there?
Well, when people answer the call, and listen, I'd like to remind everybody in the Valley, anybody listening, that we are recruiting, and it's a very honorable position. We are looked at as a gold standard for police agencies across the nation, and anybody that would like to answer the call, serve their community, help out, all you have to do is apply. And I would say that's the first step. Anybody that takes the initiative to want to be a police officer has some inherent ability deep within them to want to help and to be able to put themselves in harm's way to protect others. So, first of all, the people that we get in policing are folks that are going to want to go towards that gunfire. Now, what they do when they get there is another story, and that boils down to training. And before I can really have my verdict on what happened in Uvalde, we don't know how those officers were trained, right? And stress inoculation is the best thing we can do to see how an officer will respond when that happens.
Okay, now when you say break it down to us.
Oh, I will. I'll break it down. So, listen, if you're shooting at a paper target that is not shooting back, that's stationary, right? That's fairly easy to do, right? With some training and some repetition. If that person is shooting back, if they're moving, if you have multiple assailants, if you have to move, if you factor in fatigue, kind of the same thing with professional athletes. You have to practice how you're going to play. And if we don't do those types of stressors regularly in training, not just with an active assailant type situation, but with anything in policing, our officers will not respond, obviously, in the best way that we want them to do, right? With the sanctity of life being the utmost of importance. So when we put our officers through training, and it's in every aspect of it, if it's in the academy, if it's when they're learning how to drive the car, defensive tactics, firearms, or responding to an active assailant threat, we have to get those juices flowing. So their training will kick in and they'll know what they need to do. So, officers are going to want to run to the gunfire. That's something they do on a daily basis when they're handling calls for service to go save lives. But in a situation where it might be more of a coordinated attack, or you have to break down some doors and go get a bad guy, that's going to revert down to training. And that is it's really a daily conversation, having the mental mindset. We talked about leadership. Our sergeants, our lieutenants, some of the best in the country, they have those discussions in the briefing room with our officers and doing a critical debrief. If an incident did happen, and let's say it didn't go bad, but hey, it was maybe a false call. We talked about a rock smashed a window on the Strip, and there was some confusion, and people thought there might have been, an active shooter, and thankfully it wasn't. But our officers responded and were ready to handle it if the situation arose. Debriefing that incident, we do that debrief department-wide. Hey, these are lessons learned. If it was, what was our next move? What contingency plans do we have? So it's really a dialogue that we have daily with our officers before they go out there. And then the tactical training is done on a quarterly basis, where they're put through the paces, they're firing firearms, they're shooting on the move, they're communicating. And then lastly, I want to say we've added through our sheriff and our incoming sheriff, Kevin McMahill, he saw a need where we could save more lives, and incoming Sheriff Kevin McMahill partnered with Touro University, and they were able to get us millions of dollars worth of equipment in first aid response and tourniquets, Israeli bandages. So now, after the threat's eliminated, we don't want to lose lives waiting for the fire department and paramedics to come in. We've trained our officers to transition from crime fighters to really doing combat medicine, so they can stop the bleeding and try to save as many lives as possible.
Yeah, the committee was very impressed with the fact of the active transition from being the person who's going to suppress it to the person now who's going to provide medical attention to that. That requires a wide range of being able to make emotional shifts.
It does, and I want to remind everybody that why an active assailant, however rare they may be, is extremely horrific. Our officers still follow our use of force policy. So if that subject is no longer presenting a threat, they will be taken into custody with the least amount of force necessary. Historically, they don't. Historically, they will, shoot it out with the police or take their own life. But they do. Our officers, we train them to be the best. We train them to make those split-second decisions and be able to transition from a guardian to a warrior to a paramedic if need be. And then the last thing I'll say about we talked about the leadership on the ground, the organizational leadership. I mentioned Kevin McMahill coming in. The medical kits that our officers have are saving lives daily, and we get information where just last week we had a really bad accident officer showed up on. There was a significant head wound, and the officers used the training that they received when going through MACTAC to apply an Israeli bandage and address that wound, and was credited by the trauma doctors as saving this individual's life. So it pays dividends across the board. And we're no longer really just police officers. We're just protectors and ensuring that everybody has a good quality of life and can be as safe as possible in all aspects.
Out to share with people, I think, is 90% guardian, 10% warrior.
If not more guardian, if you really think about it. And look, the things that play in the news and nationally, some things that have occurred, we're very lucky here with our community relationships, and we can't do it alone, right? We can't arrest our way out of the problem. We've embraced restorative justice. We've embraced our de-escalation, and with that comes more and more tools available to officers to resolve a situation before having to use any kind of significant or deadly force. So I would say it's closer to 95, 98% guardian, because we've learned from an agency and the leadership that we've had and the partnerships we enjoy with the community on how to bring things to a peaceful resolution.
Folks, you heard it here on Power 88.1 PPU. It's 95 to 98%, and that's encouraging to hear, because it really shows, that old adage, people don't care about how much you know until they know about how much you care. And that guardian role, that's a lot of caring. That's a lot of caring goes into that. Captain, you made note that this training, because my wife, and I'm sure in terms of, she watches television like many of us do, her position, she was thinking, SWAT always does that. You're saying that the regular men, women in traffic and patrol know how to go in and deal with the active assailant. You don't just have to wait for SWAT.
Correct. And in that situation, we would be failing if we did wait for SWAT. Now, that's not to say a SWAT officer might be driving by and he joins in and the tactics that they do with patrol are consistent. But if we stand by and wait while individuals are being put in harm's way and potentially losing their lives, and we wait for a SWAT response, we failed as an agency. And we recognized that a long, long time ago. And then we've trained our folks to be able to have the tools necessary in everyday patrol should they have to transition to end that type of threat quickly.
So Officer Potter, while he's in PIO, Misael, you have to be ready to go into that role also.
Absolutely, yeah. Any officer on a department, I think, is prepared to take action should the need arise, because we're all over the city, and you never know when active assailant incident is going to take place.
Right.
It could be that you're the closest officer on scene, so we may have to take action right away while the rest of our resources arrive to help out.
That's really, it reaffirms something that we hear a lot, and I hope the public can get our listening audience how important training happens to be. And when the absence of that training or the absence of that leadership, and we talk about leadership here, I was just talking to one of our listeners on the way in, and he was talking about, the activity that's going on, the sheriff is running for governor, and how does the agency function? I said, it functions like the system that is designed to function like. I said, the sheriff is at the top of it, but the running of the agency, what the men and women do, they're professionally trained. They're going to do that. I think that this is a testament to that. Are you suggesting that the public become more aware of, and are you available to maybe come out and share with public organizations what you do in terms of this one specific piece of training? Is that a possibility?
We are, and just how you opened up the segment with MMAC and the police department kind of being a conduit for folks being engaged in other things, and it transpires over into school and the fathers on patrol. We are available, and I bring up the tragedy of 1 October. We teach regularly class of run, hide, fight, and it's what to do if you are confronted with a hostile situation and how you should respond. And we had concert goers that had received that training from Metro Police officers, and in the onset of that incident, when people were wondering in the confusion if it was fireworks, was it gunshots, and they stayed, these individuals already had an exit route plan. They were able to exit, and we were able to meet with them in the days after and in the debriefing process, and they credit that training for their awareness and being able to escape. So we do that training. It's a federally recognized training, run, hide, fight. You can go on the DOJ or the FBI website to see that, but we also have officers that will come out. If you have a church or a community group or a business and you would like some of that training, we will gladly come out there and teach you how to best be prepared. The other thing I want to say, it takes a community, right? If the best way to prevent an attack from happening is to stop it before it ever happens. Mm-hmm. And when we see these national events, a lot of times there were red flags, there were things that were missed, there were family, friends or loved ones or neighbors that saw something and didn't say anything. So we have the See Something, Say Something campaign.
Yes.
That's another nationally recognized campaign. And we can go on our website. We have the phone number there. You can make an anonymous tip. You can be contacted for follow-up if you want. But we would ask anybody, should they have a belief that someone might do something, I would rather have 10 false alarms, right? And somebody feels a little bad that they may have called something in that didn't pan out to be right, than that one we miss, mm-hmm. where the result could be catastrophic. Mm-hmm. So it could be anything from threats made, people posting stuff on social media, and look, a lot of people are going to do that, and we chase down a lot of leads that people don't hear about, and thankfully most of them turn out not to be true, but I would rather chase down those leads just to be on the safe side, right, versus the alternative.
That's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure at that point in time.
Yes, sir.
And how often do we really think about the active assailant until it actually happens to us? You know, we hear about it on television, we read about it in social media, but how the general John Doe, everyday public citizen like myself, it's not something that really comes across our mind.
And it really shouldn't. You know, we can't let the few incidents that have occurred, as horrific as they've been, we can't allow that to dictate our day-to-day lives, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And I want the public to have faith in their police department, not only in the Metropolitan Police Department, but all of our partner agencies across this valley. Southern Nevada law enforcement has a very good group of folks. We have some great leadership, and we are prepared. God willing, it never happens, but if it does, we are prepared to respond very quickly. We will not hesitate. We will not flinch, and we will go in there. We will stop the violence and end that threat. So the day-to-day citizen, I would ask anyone to be aware of their surroundings and aware of what's going on. And if mm-hmm. those, that intuition kicks in and those hairs on the back of your neck stand up because of something, or you have an employee that you fired that may make some harsh comments or post something disturbing, mm-hmm. Don't take that for granted and call it in. Mm-hmm. But listen, day to day, your life should not change.
You talked about the first responders responding together 1 October and how you learned from that event of how you need a coordinated response in order to be more effective in bringing about at least reduce the problem that you're having and bring about the best outcome you can. Share with that a bit about that.
So we are unique as a Las Vegas Valley, and I have extreme pride in ownership of this valley, being born and raised here. So I had the opportunity a few years ago to go to the FBI National Academy, and that's where we send senior leadership and executive level officers from around the country to go train at the FBI Academy and learn about what we're doing nationally and best practices. Las Vegas Metro Police was referenced a lot in having some best practices for things that we've done, because we've made our mistakes, but we have rebounded and learned from them. And the way we work with the fire department, these other agencies will look at me cross-eyed. That wasn't really happening a few years ago. Right. And we train regularly at the new training facility. We have a fire captain that's in there with us, and they are integrated in a part of our weekly training that we do for MACTAC. So there is that component, and everybody knows what's supposed to happen. A firefighter's not going to go into a zone that's hot without being cleared, but they can let us know what we need to do to get them in there after we've helped triage some of those patients, because at the end of the day, we're all about saving lives, no matter if you're police, fire, what color uniform you're wearing. That's what our citizens expect, and that's the service that we're going to provide.
We can say that in the LVMPD, we can say to the citizens that, there are things that's going to happen, but this agency, along with others here in the Valley, are fully capable and ready of addressing those type of needs.
And they are, and I don't want to be too boastful, but it is because of our partnership with the community, right? It's because of the lessons that we've learned. It's because of radio shows like this, where you have certain law enforcement agencies, and they think the radio and the media and community groups are the adversaries, and I believe we're quite different. And again, that all boils down to the leadership. So we thank the community for our successes and being able to do what we do, and holding us accountable for when we do make a mistake, bringing up some things that we can think about to always try to be better.
Well, we saw here in Bolden Area Command, William 5 and 6, we loved it when crime dropped by violent crime 45%, and one person said, man, Bolden Area Command is not safe for criminals anymore. Because the citizens, and it really was one resolving, when there was a crime, bringing it to a resolution, but they're also changing the style. And, you know, we often mention Sheriff-elect Kevin McMahill was the one who initiated that whole idea and that whole concept that changed without, as he said, we didn't add any more people and add more manpower. We just changed the way we were interacting. As you say, that type of engagement really then keeps the citizens saying that there's some things that we can do. If we, as you say, see something, say something.
Absolutely. And look, as a young officer, I started my career here before it was even the Bolden Area Command. I was one of the squads that opened up the Bolden Area Command, and you wouldn't see a lot of officers at community events, and you wouldn't see a lot of citizens out there waving and saying hello to the police.
Right.
And in certain instances, they may have been just afraid of us as they were of the criminals. And Kevin McMahill is definitely somebody that changed that narrative. And just driving down today, you have a Starbucks, you have officers out at Boys and Girls Clubs, you have the community waving and saying hello, and then in the
Bolden Area Little League is half of the coaches of LVMPD.
That's right. And then I'd also like to point out at our last academy graduation, we had several new officers that had grown up in the Bolden Area Command and some areas that were considered traditional gang neighborhoods years ago.
Right.
And through the transformative process that we've had as an agency, those are no longer looked at as gang neighborhoods. And these new officers cited their positive interactions they had with police officers growing up for wanting to answer the call and be police officers. So that's rewarding. It lets us know that we're hitting the mark, and they're feeling like they are part of the community and they can protect the community now. So,
you know, this community, I hope it's going to be appreciative of the fact of how far this agency has come and its transformation, and it continues to change, and how much we can look forward to the next 4 years. I hear the Sheriff-elect says he has a plan for 4 years. He's not planning beyond that. We're all hoping that we can get 8 years out of him.
I'm hoping that too. When you talk about time, we have a very important thing coming up next July. July is our 50-year anniversary for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. So
that's a lot to celebrate.
We want the community to know we want to celebrate that with you because you were a part of this. So we'll be meeting up later, and if you have ideas, send them on in so we can have a huge celebration for our 50 years of partnering with this community and serving it.
And so you're indigenous here. So what high school did you go to?
I went to Green Valley High School.
Okay, I forgive you. Everybody can't be perfect, so some people.
Where did you go?
I went to Valley High School.
Okay.
I mean, when we graduated, there were only like 6 high schools.
Right.
Now there are just like 26 high schools. And look at the community you provide public safety for. I mean, it's very diverse. It's very complex. You have so many religious faiths. You have so many ethnic groups. You have a huge tourist population that you have to deal with. Your organization development training, you have a lot on your plate in preparing for this type of environment.
A lot on my plate, but very rewarding. And being able to see the natural progression of our police officers from that day one of the academy where they're sitting there all nervous and they really find themselves to the day they graduate and they're walking out there chest puffed up, ready to serve that community, just the transition that they have. And then a program I want to start up with you again is Adopt a Cop. I know with COVID we stopped that for a while, but that was important as well in bringing our officers to the community and allowing them to interact before they even hit the streets and see what they're really the job is about.
Well, I want you to know one of your sergeants in field training, I think Sergeant Sabino, he and I have been emailing each other. We're already beginning the dialogue. Schools are back in now, so Captain, we're looking forward to it. The next field training, we're going to have a team out there. Thank you so very much for remembering. So you see, people, there's benefits and great rewards. Misael, anything that you want to close with before we wrap up?
No, I think it was a great discussion. Captain, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, gentlemen.
Great service to the community, great service to the Valley Indes Police Department. We appreciate your service. And remember, to our listening audience, always tune in on Wednesdays. To the ministers who listen in, reach out to someone in the agencies. We can get you with Captain Rader and his team, get that training out to you so you know what happens when there's an active assailant. Remember, we always ask God to cure us of our hardships. Do you ever think that the hardships are curing us? Have a good day. We talk to you next week on another edition of Police Promoting Unity. Thank you for listening in.